My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old, working as a trauma therapist in Austin. 7 years ago, on the night of my 25th birthday, my life took a drastic turn. My stepfather, Henry, who had tormented our family for over a decade, broke into my apartment in a drunken fury. As he dislocated my shoulder and I fell to the ground, my mother just stood there, watching. Before I explain how that terrifying night changed my life, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, and please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about overcoming challenges. My childhood was mostly peaceful until I turned 8. That's when my biological father passed away from aggressive lung cancer, leaving my mother, Diane, and me to face life without him. For 4 years, it was just the two of us in our cozy suburban home outside of Austin. Mom juggled 2 jobs to keep us financially stable. Yet, despite her fatigue, she always found time for me. We enjoyed movie nights every Friday, baked cookies on weekends, and she never missed a single school event. Those years were tough, but our bond deepened through the struggles. Everything shifted when I turned 12. Mom met Henry at the bank where she had just started working as a teller. He was the branch manager, a seemingly respectable man with a stable job and financial security. I still remember the first time she introduced him to me at dinner. He came with a bouquet of flowers for Mom and a book about astronomy for me, having learned from her that I was captivated by stars. Henry was charming, attentive, and appeared genuinely interested in getting to know me. Initially, I was reluctant, still grieving for my dad, but Henry never rushed me. He took his time, often including me in their outings to the zoo or museum. After 6 months of dating, Henry proposed, and they tied the knot when I was 13. The wedding was small yet elegant, just as Mom had envisioned. Henry had money, far more than we were accustomed to, and he moved us into his spacious colonial home in a fancy neighborhood. I have my own room now, complete with a new computer and a bookshelf. Initially, everything felt perfect for the first few months. The changes were subtle at the beginning. Henry took charge of all the finances, persuading Mom to shut down her personal bank account and combine everything with his. He had logical reasons for everything. It was more efficient. They would save on fees. They were a family now. Mom agreed, perhaps too readily, eager to believe she had found security once more. Then Henry began to express opinions about Mom's friends. He thought Karen was too gossipy. He considered Rose a bad influence with her talk of divorce. He believed Jennifer spent too carelessly and would encourage Mom to do the same. Gradually, Mom's social circle diminished as she stopped reaching out to avoid Henry's disapproving remarks. Phone calls became less frequent, and visits nearly vanished. I noticed changes in Mom as well. The woman who used to sing while cooking now moved quietly around the kitchen. She consulted Henry before making any purchases, even minor ones. Her once vibrant wardrobe was replaced by more conservative outfits that Henry approved of. She stopped wearing the bright red lipstick she had always adored. The first time I witnessed Henry's anger, I was 14. Mom had bought a dress without asking him first. It wasn't expensive, just a simple sundress for a staff picnic, but Henry lost it. He didn't hit her, not that time, but he hurled his dinner plate against the wall, shattering it and leaving spaghetti sauce dripping down our cream-colored wallpaper like blood. He called her irresponsible, financially reckless, and ungrateful. Mom apologized, returned the dress the very next day, and never shopped alone again. By the time I entered high school, I had devised strategies to limit my interactions with Henry. I joined every after-school club I could, studied at the library, and spent weekends at friends' houses. When I was home, I stayed in my room with the door closed, only coming out when absolutely necessary. Henry never outright prohibited me from these activities, probably because he preferred me to stay out of his way. My relationship with my mom worsened during those years. I held resentment towards her for changing, for choosing Henry over the close bond we once shared. Whenever I attempted to discuss Henry's controlling nature with her, she brushed off my worries. "You don't understand adult relationships," she would say. Henry provides for us. We're fortunate to have him. Eventually, I gave up trying to connect with her. We shared the same house, yet lived in entirely different worlds. In my junior year, I stumbled upon Mom applying makeup to hide a bruise on her cheek. She insisted she had bumped into a door in the dark, but her reflection in the mirror avoided my gaze. That was the moment I realized with certainty that Henry's abuse had escalated from emotional to physical. I pleaded with her to leave him. She declined, claiming it was merely a one-time incident due to Henry's work stress. I knew better. But at 16, I felt helpless to assist someone unwilling to help herself. The following 2 years became a careful balance of avoidance and strategy. I kept my grades impeccable, aware that education was my escape route. I researched colleges far away, applied for every scholarship I could find, and worked part-time at a local bookstore to save money. Henry appeared pleased with my academic achievements, seeing them as a testament to his parenting, and mostly left me alone. Mom became increasingly withdrawn, a mere shadow of the woman who had once been my closest friend and strongest protector. When my acceptance letter from Austin University arrived, along with a generous scholarship, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Henry was unexpectedly supportive, likely because my accomplishments reflected positively on him in the community, and perhaps he was eager to have me out of the house. Mom seemed caught between pride and fear. The night before I departed for college, she visited my room after Henry had gone to sleep. "I am so proud of you," she softly said, sitting on the edge of my bed just like she used to when I was a child. "You are destined for great things." There was a tone in her voice, a blend of sadness and yearning, that made my heart feel heavy. "Come with me," I suggested on a whim. "We could share an apartment. You could look for a job in Austin." She shook her head, that familiar expression of resignation washing over her face. "This is my life now, Clara, but it doesn't have to be yours. Promise me you will create a good life for yourself, no matter what happens." The next morning, Henry drove us to Austin in a tense silence. He helped carry my boxes to the dorm room, playing the part of a devoted stepfather perfectly in front of my roommate and her parents. When it was time to say goodbye, Mom hugged me tightly, whispering, "I love you," in my ear. Henry awkwardly patted my shoulder and handed me a check for emergencies. I never cashed it. My first semester at college felt like stepping out of a dark cave into the bright sunlight. I made friends who were unaware of my home life, joined study groups, and even auditioned for the debate team. My roommate Zoe was studying journalism and introduced me to her diverse group of friends. For the first time in years, I felt normal, free from the constant strain of living with Henry. I declared psychology as my major in my sophomore year, motivated by a desire to comprehend what had happened to my family. Why did Mom stay with Henry? Why did Henry feel the need to control and hurt others? Could I have acted differently? My professors recognized my intensity, my urgent quest for answers. Professor Sarah Levine took a special interest in my academic journey. An expert in trauma and domestic violence, she became my mentor and eventually a friend. One day during office hours, I finally shared my home situation. Instead of pity, she provided understanding and practical guidance. She suggested books, linked me with support groups for adult children from abusive homes, and motivated me to think about therapy. "The patterns we grow up with shape us," she said. "But they don't have to define us. Understanding them is the first step to breaking free." Communication with my mom became more challenging during those years. Our phone conversations were short and shallow, always when Henry was at work. She never revealed anything significant about her life, deflecting my inquiries with vague reassurances that everything was okay. I returned home for the holidays during my freshman year. However, the atmosphere was so oppressive that I found reasons to remain at school for most breaks afterward. Mom would visit me occasionally, always by herself, constantly glancing over her shoulder as if Henry might suddenly appear behind her. To support myself, I worked at the university library for 20 hours a week. The calm, organized setting was comforting, and my supervisor was accommodating with my class schedule. I was determined to achieve financial independence, refusing to accept any money associated with Henry. I lived on a tight budget, shopped at thrift stores, and learned to prepare inexpensive, healthy meals in the dorm kitchen. During my junior year, I met Eric in my abnormal psychology class. He was training to become a clinical social worker, passionate about assisting at-risk youth. Unlike the few guys I had casually dated before, Eric was patient and insightful. He recognized when certain subjects made me uneasy and never pressured me to share more than I was comfortable with. Gradually, I opened up to him about my family, gauging his reactions with small disclosures before confiding the complete story. "Your mom needs help," he said after learning about her situation. "But so do you. Having a parent in an abusive relationship impacts you too, even from afar." With Eric's support, I began seeing a therapist at the university's counseling center. Dr. Melissa guided me through my complex emotions of love, anger, and guilt related to my mother, as well as my fear and resentment towards Henry. Gradually, I came to realize that I couldn't save my mom if she wasn't ready to leave. However, I could create a healthy life for myself. I graduated summa cum laude with Professor Levine writing glowing recommendations for graduate programs. Mom was present at my graduation ceremony, sitting alone in the audience while Henry claimed he had a work emergency. She appeared older than her 47 years, her once vibrant brown hair now mixed with gray, and her posture slightly hunched as if she was always preparing for something bad. Afterward, we went to dinner, just the two of us, at a cozy Italian restaurant near campus. "I always knew you would achieve something special," she said with a genuine smile. "For the first time in years, your father would have been so proud." I reached across the table to hold her hand. "I'm staying in Austin. I found an apartment and a job at a community mental health center. You can visit any time. Stay as long as you like." She squeezed my hand but then pulled it back to play with her napkin. "I will try. Things are just hectic with Henry's work schedule and the house." Her voice faded, and I sensed her fear of making promises she couldn't fulfill. We said goodbye with tight hugs and tentative plans for her to visit that summer. As I watched her taxi drive away, I wondered if I would ever truly have my real mother back. After graduation, I moved into my one-bedroom apartment in a renovated brownstone in Somerville, just a short subway ride from downtown Austin. The rent was a stretch for my budget, but having my own secure space was worth every penny. My job at the Riverside Community Mental Health Center was entry-level, where I assisted licensed therapists with their paperwork and occasionally sat in on group therapy sessions. The pay was modest, but the experience was priceless, especially when paired with the part-time graduate courses I was taking in clinical psychology. 6 months into my new life, I got an unexpected message from Eric. We had amicably parted ways before graduation, both concentrating on our careers and uncertain about sustaining a long-distance relationship since he had taken a job in Chicago. His message was straightforward. He was relocating back to Austin for a new job opportunity and wanted to know if I would be interested in grabbing coffee and catching up. Our coffee reunion turned into dinner, which then blossomed into regular dates. Eric had grown during our time apart, becoming more confident in his abilities and clearer about his aspirations. He was now employed at a non-profit organization that offered counseling services to low-income families, especially those impacted by addiction. We slipped back into our relationship with surprising ease, both more self-aware and better at communicating than we had been during college. One evening, while on a video call with my mom, I noticed a yellowish bruise fading around her right eye. When I inquired about it, she nervously adjusted her webcam and said she had tripped on the stairs while carrying laundry. The explanation could have been believable if not for the way her eyes darted around, likely checking if Henry was within earshot. "Mom," I said gently, "you know you can tell me anything, right? If something is going on, I can help." "Everything is fine, sweetie," she insisted, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How is your new project at work going? The sudden change of subject was typical, but I chose not to press further. Instead, I began calling more often at various times of the day, hoping to catch her when she felt more comfortable to talk. I also became friends with Margaret, a colleague who specialized in domestic violence cases. Without breaching confidentiality about my mom, I asked general questions about how abuse escalates and what resources are available for victims. The most dangerous time is when they try to leave, Margaret explained during one lunch break. That is when control is threatened, and abusers often escalate to prevent losing their victim. Any escape plan must prioritize safety above all else. I began looking into domestic violence shelters in my parents' area, compiling phone numbers and addresses in a password-protected document on my computer. I explored legal options, restraining orders, and support groups, all while understanding that none of it would matter unless Mom was ready to take that first daunting step. 3 months before my 25th birthday, Mom called while I was having dinner with Eric at my apartment. Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "He found the brochure," she said. "What brochure?" I inquired, already suspecting the answer. "For the Women's Center. The one you sent me." He searched through my purse. She was now crying, trying to keep her voice down. "He claims I am ungrateful for planning to leave him after all he has done for me. He broke my phone. I'm using the neighbor's landline while he is out." My heart raced. "Mom, please listen. Pack a small bag. Just the essentials. I will arrange an Uber for you to the bus station. You can come stay with me. We will sort everything out once you are safe." "I can't just leave," she weakly protested. "The house, my job. What will people think?" "None of that matters if you aren't safe," I insisted. "Please, Mom. I'm scared of what he might do." There was a long silence. "Maybe you are right," she finally replied. "Let me think it over. I will call you back tomorrow when he is at work." Eric, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, looked worried. "Do you think she is in immediate danger? Should we contact the local police for a welfare check?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Henry is cautious. He has never done anything that would lead to his arrest. If we call the police and nothing happens, it could make things worse for her." We stayed up late discussing options with Eric, helping me refine a safety plan for Mom. I hardly slept, waiting for her call the next day. When it finally came, my heart sank at her first words. "Everything is fine now," she said, her voice unnaturally cheerful. Henry and I had a meaningful conversation. He shared his concerns about me being influenced by negative individuals. We are set to begin marriage counseling. I could sense the dishonesty in every word and could visualize Henry standing beside her, scrutinizing every phrase. "Mom, are you certain? You know you can confide in me if you need to." "Absolutely certain," she cut in. "Oh, Henry wants to say hi." Before I could object, his voice came through the speaker, smooth and composed as always. "Clara, it's lovely to hear that you've been in touch with your mother. I trust you aren't filling her mind with nonsense regarding our relationship." "I just want her to be safe and happy," I responded cautiously. "She is both of those things with me," he stated, a subtle threat lurking beneath his friendly tone. "Perhaps you should concentrate on your own life rather than trying to meddle in ours. Family is sacred, Clara. Keep that in mind." The call ended suddenly. Anxious and worried, I reached out to the local police department to explain the situation. The officer was understanding but clarified that without proof of a crime or direct testimony from my mother, there was little they could do. "If she calls and claims she is in danger, we will respond right away," he reassured me. "But we cannot impose help on someone who isn't seeking it." Frustrated and frightened, I attempted to call Mom repeatedly over the following weeks, but I always reached her voicemail. The few text messages I received were clearly written under Henry's watchful eye, generic updates about gardening projects and community happenings. As my birthday drew near, the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened. Something felt off, profoundly off, but I was powerless to remedy it from 200 miles away. My 25th birthday landed on a Friday in late October. The air had turned crisp, with leaves crunching beneath my feet as I walked home from the subway after work. Under normal circumstances, I might have organized a celebration with friends or a romantic dinner with Eric. Instead, I had agreed to let him take me out the next evening since he had an unavoidable client emergency that Friday night. "I will make it up to you tomorrow," he assured me, kissing me goodbye that morning. "We will have the best belated birthday celebration ever." My colleagues surprised me with cupcakes and a small gift card during lunch. Throughout the day, birthday wishes flowed in via text and social media. I attempted to call Mom several times, but as I expected, there was no answer. I left a cheerful voicemail, avoiding any mention of the tension from our last conversation, simply expressing my love for her and hoping to hear from her soon. My apartment greeted me with familiar comfort that evening. Situated on the third floor of a well-kept brownstone, it boasted high ceilings, wooden floors, and large windows that allowed plenty of natural light. The security was decent, with a main entrance requiring a key fob and solid locks on individual apartment doors. I had personalized the space with second-hand furniture, plants, and framed psychology articles that I found particularly inspiring. It was small but felt safe, a sanctuary from the chaos of my childhood. I treated myself to takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened a bottle of wine, and settled on the couch with a novel I had been wanting to read. Around 9, Eric called to wish me a happy birthday again and promised that tomorrow's celebration would be worth the wait. By 11, I had changed into pajamas and was drifting off to sleep, the novel left abandoned on my nightstand. Suddenly, the pounding on my door jolted me awake. Disoriented, I fumbled for my phone to check the time. 12:17 a.m. The pounding continued, growing more urgent, now mixed with a voice I recognized with horrifying clarity. "Open this door." Clara Henry's voice was slurred but unmistakable. "I know you are in there." My heart raced as I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Henry stood in the hallway, his face flushed with anger, alcohol, or perhaps both. Behind him, partially hidden, was my mother, her face a mask of fear. Henry pounded again, the door shaking in its frame. "What are you doing here?" I shouted through the door, trying to keep my voice calm while desperately typing a text to Eric with one hand. "It is after midnight. We came to wish you a happy birthday," Henry said with a grotesque attempt at cheerfulness. "Open up, Clara. Don't be rude to your parents." "Please leave," I said louder. "I will call the police if you don't go." That was when something in Henry snapped. "You ungrateful little brat." He roared, throwing his body against the door with such force that the wood splintered around the lock. 2 more powerful kicks and the door completely gave way. Henry stumbled into my apartment, rage burning in his eyes. I backed away, phone tightly held in my hand. "I am calling 911, I warned, my fingers already dialing. Henry lunged forward with surprising speed for a man of his size. He knocked the phone from my hand, sending it skidding across the floor. Before I could react, his fingers tangled in my hair, yanking me forward so violently that pain shot through my scalp. His other hand formed a fist that struck my cheekbone, sending stars dancing in my vision. "Henry, stop," my mother's voice, thin and terrified from the doorway. "Please, you are hurting her." He ignored her, dragging me by the hair across the living room and slamming me into the wall. My head hit the plaster, momentarily dazing me. I tried to fight back, clawing at his face, kicking at his shins, but Henry outweighed me by at least 100 pounds. "Mom, help me!" I screamed, making eye contact with her over Henry's shoulder. She stood frozen in the doorway, hands covering her mouth, eyes wide with horror, but her body remained immobile. "Please, Mom." Henry spun me around, grabbed my right arm, and twisted it behind my back, pushing upward with brutal force. A sickening pop echoed as my shoulder dislocated, the pain so severe that my vision narrowed to mere pinpricks of light amidst a dark void. I let out a scream, primal and filled with agony. "This is what happens when you try to destroy a family," Henry hissed in my ear, his breath hot and reeking of whiskey. "This is what you deserve." He slammed me against the wall once more, my already injured shoulder absorbing the force of the blow. The pain was blinding and nauseating. I felt a crack in my rib cage as he struck me again, this time in the side. Another hit landed on my temple, sending me crashing to the floor. Through swollen eyes, I spotted my phone just inches from my outstretched left hand. Summoning the last of my strength, I lunged for it, my fingers finding the emergency SOS button I had set up. 3 quick presses sent my location to emergency services. Henry's foot connected with my ribs again, and I curled into a protective ball, tasting blood and feeling consciousness slipping away. The last image I recall before darkness enveloped me was my mother's face, tears streaming down her cheeks, her mouth moving in words I could no longer hear. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder before fading as I drifted into unconsciousness. The steady beeping of a heart monitor pulled me from the abyss. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but I managed to open them to a blur of white ceiling and fluorescent lights. Pain radiated from seemingly everywhere, especially my right shoulder and rib cage. A warm pressure on my left hand caught my attention, and I turned my head slightly to see Eric sitting beside the hospital bed. His fingers were intertwined with mine, his head bowed in what appeared to be prayer or exhaustion. "Eric," I attempted to say, but it came out as a rasp. His head snapped up, relief washing over his weary features. "Clara," he whispered, leaning closer. "Thank God. Let me get the nurse." He pressed a button, and moments later, a nurse hurried in, followed by a doctor in a white coat. They assessed my vitals, asked me questions to evaluate my mental condition, and detailed my injuries. "You have a dislocated right shoulder, which we fixed while you were unconscious," the doctor said. "You also have 2 fractured ribs on your right side, facial bruises, and a mild concussion. You were fortunate that the police arrived when they did. Do you recall what happened?" The memories surged back with terrifying clarity. Henry breaking down my door, the initial punch, my mother witnessing it, the sickening sound of my shoulder popping out of place. I nodded slowly, grimacing at the pain that the movement caused. "Henry," I managed to say. "My stepfather, he attacked me." "My mother was there too." "Are they?" "Your stepfather is in custody," Eric replied, his voice laced with restrained anger. "The police apprehended him at the scene. Your mother is in the waiting room. She has been here all night but was too scared to come in." A police officer arrived shortly after, a woman with kind eyes and a notebook. She introduced herself as Officer Rivera and explained that she needed my statement while the events were still fresh in my mind. With Eric holding my hand for support, I recounted everything from the midnight banging on my door to losing consciousness as the sirens drew near. "We have your stepfather in custody on charges of breaking and entering, assault, and battery," Officer Rivera confirmed. "Your emergency call recorded parts of the attack, and the evidence of forced entry is clear. Your injuries and the medical report will back up the case. The question now is whether you wish to press charges." "Yes," I replied without a moment's hesitation. "I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent possible." Officer Rivera nodded. "Good. Too often in domestic cases, victims hesitate to come forward. There will be paperwork to sign when you feel better. We will also need to discuss a restraining order." After she left, Eric helped fill in the blanks in my memory. He had received my partial text and called the police himself when I didn't respond to his frantic callbacks. He reached my apartment just after the ambulance, discovering the door broken and blood on the wall of the living room. The police had Henry in handcuffs inside a patrol car and were attempting to soothe my distraught mother. Eric gently remarked that she had been a wreck, oscillating between tears and complete withdrawal. She provided a statement to the police that corroborated everything you mentioned. I believe she is in shock. I was still absorbing this when a gentle knock sounded at the door. My mother appeared, looking smaller than I remembered, her face pale with dark circles under her swollen eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tentative. Eric glanced at me with a questioning look, and I nodded in response. He squeezed my hand and then stood up. "I'll make some coffee and give you two some space." As he closed the door behind him, Mom approached the bed slowly, as if she feared I would send her away. When she got a close look at my face, the bruises now a deep purple, she covered her mouth with her hand, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Clara, I am so sorry." A part of me wanted to turn away, dismissing her apology as too little, too late. But a larger part recognized what I had overlooked during our video calls, the haunted expression in her eyes, the slight shake of her hands, the way she flinched at sudden movements. These were classic signs of trauma that I had been trained to identify in others, yet somehow missed in my own mother. "Please sit down, Mom," I said, motioning to the chair Eric had just vacated. She sat on the edge, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "I never thought he would hurt you," she confessed. "He threatened so many times, but I thought it was just talk. I believed that if I stayed with him and did everything he wanted, he would leave you alone." "How long has he been hurting you?" I inquired, although I already knew the answer. "Since about a year after we got married," she admitted, revealing that it began with pushing and grabbing too hard, followed by slaps for which he would immediately apologize. I promised myself I would never do that again. By the time things escalated, I felt trapped. He had control over all our finances, cut me off from my friends, and made me believe I was worthless and fortunate to have him. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "He threatened to kill you if I ever left him, claiming he would track you down no matter where you went. I believed him, Clara. I stayed to keep you safe, but ultimately, I failed." It was the twisted reasoning of abuse victims, something I had read about but never truly grasped until that moment. My mother had suffered for years, thinking it was the only way to protect me, while I had held resentment towards her for not leaving. "Why did he come after me now?" I inquired. "Your birthday card," she answered. "You sent a card with a note saying your door was always open for me." Henry found it and flew into a rage. He had been drinking all night, growing angrier by the minute. He kept accusing me, saying, "You were trying to take me away, ruin our marriage. He forced me into the car, threatening to teach you a lesson." She completely broke down, sobbing into her hands. I should have intervened. I should have done something. When he began hitting you, I was paralyzed. I have never felt more self-loathing than in that moment. A nurse entered to check my pain levels and give me medication. By the time she left, my mother had somewhat regained her composure, though her eyes were still red-rimmed and haunted. "The police want to know if I am going to press charges." I told her I am. "He deserves to be in prison, Mom." She nodded slowly. "I know. I already informed them that I will testify against him. I am done living in fear, Clara. It took witnessing him hurt you for me to finally realize that staying silent does not protect anyone." That afternoon, my colleague Margaret arrived after hearing about the assault from Eric. She brought resources for both my mom and me, including information about victim services, therapy options, and support groups. More importantly, she connected us with Jessica, a lawyer who specializes in domestic violence cases. Jessica came to see me in the hospital the next day, outlining the legal steps we would face. "Henry has been denied bail because of the seriousness of the attack and the risk of him fleeing," as she informed us. "The prosecutor is bringing multiple felony charges against him. With your testimony, your mother's, and the physical evidence, we have a solid case." Mom stayed at a hotel close to the hospital, visiting me every day as I healed. We had more open conversations than we had in years. difficult discussions about our past and cautious ones about what lies ahead. She agreed to see a therapist who specializes in domestic abuse, marking the first step in a long healing journey for both of us. After 5 days, I was released with my arm in a sling, prescriptions for pain relief, and follow-up care appointments. Eric insisted I stay at his apartment until mine was fixed and secured with better locks. Mom came along too, taking Eric's spare room while I took his bed, and he slept on the couch despite my objections. In those initial weeks of recovery, as my body gradually healed and the legal case against Henry developed, Mom and I started the sensitive process of mending our relationship. There were moments of tension, with unspoken resentment surfacing, but also instances of unexpected bonding. We were now two survivors connected by shared trauma, but also by the hope of breaking free from Henry's influence. 3 months after the attack, I stood outside the Suffolk County Courthouse, gripping Eric's hand tightly. My shoulder had healed enough that I no longer needed the sling, although certain movements still caused discomfort. The physical therapist mentioned I might always have some limitations in that joint, a lasting reminder of that night. The courthouse loomed large with its granite columns and wide steps, designed to intimidate with its grandeur. Inside, the polished marble floors echoed with hurried footsteps, hushed conversations, and the occasional authoritative voice calling out a case number or name. The air was filled with the scent of furniture polish and anxiety. Jessica greeted us in the lobby, looking professional in a navy suit, her briefcase stuffed with documents. "Are you ready?" she inquired, her eyes assessing my emotional state. I nodded, adjusting the collar of my own suit, which I had chosen carefully to convey strength and credibility, as prepared as I could be. Mom arrived moments later, having come separately from the domestic violence shelter where she had been staying. The weeks of safety and support had started to change her. She stood taller, made more consistent eye contact, and spoke with increased confidence. The shelter had linked her with job counseling and assisted her in initiating the divorce process. "Henry is already inside with his attorney," Jessica informed us. "Remember what we practiced. Answer questions directly. Don't let them provoke emotional reactions. We have the facts and evidence on our side." The courtroom fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning to evaluate us. Henry was seated at the defense table, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He resembled a CEO more than a man accused of violent assault. Next to him was his lawyer, Thomas Wilson, known for representing affluent clients and achieving favorable outcomes through aggressive strategies. Henry's eyes met mine for a brief moment, a flash of contempt crossing his face before he regained his composure. I refused to look away, maintaining his gaze until he turned to whisper something to his attorney. That small victory gave me steadiness as we took our seats behind the prosecution table. The proceedings commenced with opening statements. The prosecutor, Maria Delgado, clearly and forcefully outlined the case, detailing the assault and my injuries. She emphasized Henry's history of controlling behavior and the premeditated nature of the attack. Wilson's opening presented a starkly different narrative. Henry, as a worried stepfather, was concerned about my impact on my mother, who had gone to have a discussion that escalated when I supposedly became hysterical and attacked him, forcing him to defend himself. The lie was so absurd that I had to grip the bench to prevent myself from objecting. "They will attempt to twist everything," Jessica whispered. "Let the evidence speak for itself." When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with purpose, calmly swore to tell the truth, and faced the courtroom. For almost 2 hours, I responded to the prosecutor's inquiries about my childhood. After Henry came into our lives, I described the increasing control, my mother's isolation, and finally, in painful detail, the events of that October night. At any point, Delgado asked, "Did you attack or threaten Mr. Sullivan before he broke down your door?" "No," I replied firmly. "I never even opened the door. I asked him to leave and warned that I would call the police if he did not." Wilson's cross-examination was exactly as Jessica had prepared me for, aggressive and manipulative, designed to provoke emotional reactions that could make me seem unstable. Is it not true, Miss Moore, that you have been trying to separate your mother from your stepfather for years? He pressed. I have been trying to help my mother escape an abusive relationship, I calmly corrected him. And you sent materials about leaving one spouse to your mother's home, knowing they would likely be found by Mr. Sullivan. I sent information about domestic violence resources because I was worried for her safety. He tried to portray me as vindictive, resentful of Henry's authority, and determined to ruin their marriage out of jealousy. With each question, I took a breath before responding, sticking to the facts and refusing to be provoked into anger. My mother's testimony the next day was both heartbreaking and powerful. Her voice trembled at first as she recounted 12 years of increasing abuse, but it became more powerful as she elaborated on Henry's threats, the financial control, the isolation, and ultimately the night he forced her into the car to confront me. He claimed he was going to teach Clara a lesson for trying to turn me against him, she testified. I was filled with fear that he would harm her, yet too scared to oppose him. When he began to hit her, I was paralyzed. It felt like witnessing a nightmare from which I could not awaken. Wilson's effort to undermine her by implying she was mentally unstable or pursuing financial gain through divorce backfired when Mom calmly explained how Henry had made sure she had no access to money, no credit in her name, and no means to support herself independently. Next, the medical evidence was presented, including photographs of my injuries and the doctor's report detailing the dislocated shoulder, fractured ribs, concussion, and facial contusions. The emergency room physician testified about the considerable force needed to inflict such injuries. The jury visibly reacted to the images, with several members casting looks of open disgust at Henry. Officer Rivera and her partner recounted the scene they discovered at my apartment, the broken door, blood on the wall, my unconscious body on the floor, and Henry still in a rage as they restrained him. A partial recording of my emergency call was played in court, my screams and Henry's threats echoing in the quiet room. Throughout the week-long trial, I faced Henry's icy glare each day, determined not to be intimidated. Eric remained by my side, his presence a constant source of support. My colleagues from the mental health center came to show their solidarity, as did Professor Levine, who had traveled from Austin University. On the final day, during closing arguments, I asked for permission to speak directly to the court. The judge, after consulting with both attorneys, granted it. Standing before the jury, I spoke sincerely from the heart. What I experienced that night was not merely a singular episode of anger, it was the result of years of manipulation and mistreatment. My stepfather's attacks were not limited to physical violence. He spent years methodically eroding my mother's self-worth, cutting her off from any support, and persuading her that his abusive behavior was a form of love and protection. Domestic violence flourishes in an environment of silence and shame. By sharing our truth today, my mother and I have chosen to break that silence. The jury took only 2 hours to reach their decision. As the 4 women rose, the courtroom fell into a profound silence. On the charge of breaking and entering, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of assault and battery with the intent to inflict serious bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. A wave of relief washed over me so powerful that I almost collapsed. My mom held my hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Henry's calm demeanor finally shattered, his face twisting in anger as the bailiffs moved in to take him away. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, the judge showed no mercy. Mr. Sullivan, you have exploited your position of trust to instill fear in your family for years. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison. As they escorted Henry out, I felt a burden lift that I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand tall. For the first time since I was 12, I could breathe freely, unafraid of the man who had loomed so large over our lives. 2 years after the trial, on a bright spring morning, I stood in front of a small crowd in the community room of the Austin Women's Shelter. My hair had grown back since I had cut it short after the attack, now cascading in soft waves past my shoulders. The physical scars had faded, although my right shoulder still ached in cold weather and would never fully regain its range of motion. "My name is Clara Moore," I began, "and today I want to share my journey from victim to survivor to thriver." The women in the audience were already familiar with parts of my story. Some individuals had participated in support groups that I led. Others had sought counseling at the Breakthrough Center, the organization I established after earning my master's degree in trauma psychology. Following the trial, I immersed myself in my studies, resolved to transform my experiences into something impactful. With the support of Professor Levine and a grant from a Victims Advocacy Foundation, I founded a small yet expanding center aimed at assisting domestic violence survivors in rebuilding their lives. 2 years ago, I found myself in a hospital bed, both physically and emotionally shattered. Today, I stand before you not because the pain has vanished, but because I have learned to carry it in a different way. Healing is not a straightforward journey, it is chaotic and nonlinear. Setbacks and breakthroughs can occur on the same day. My mother sat in the front row, her pride shining through her smile. She had lived with me for 6 months after the trial, attending therapy 3 times a week, gradually rediscovering her voice and identity. Now, she has her own apartment close to mine and works part-time at a local bookstore, slowly crafting an independent life. Our relationship has evolved through numerous challenging conversations, tears, and ultimately, sincere forgiveness. Not forgiveness for Henry, but for ourselves and for each other, for the moments we failed to understand, failed to act, and failed to support one another in impossible situations. The most difficult lesson I shared with the audience was that you cannot save someone who is not ready to be saved. However, you can create a safe space for them to return to when they are prepared. You can keep a light on in the darkness. Eric sat next to my mother, the diamond on my left hand sparkling as I gestured. Our engagement was recent, a decision we made only after considerable thought and discussion. Eric has been patient, recognizing that trauma alters a person's relationship with trust and intimacy. He had never pressured me, never hurried me, but instead remained a steady presence as I navigated my healing journey. The physical recovery was tough. After months of physical therapy, I regained most of the function in my shoulder, although some movements still caused pain. The nightmares were even more intense, vivid reenactments of the attack that left me soaked in sweat and shaking. Thanks to therapy and medication, they gradually lessened, now only surfacing during particularly stressful times. I shared with the group that trauma resides in the body. It impacts us on physical, emotional, and spiritual levels. Healing must encompass all these aspects. I practiced what I preached, blending traditional therapy with yoga, meditation, and even art classes. Painting emerged as an unexpected form of expression. My amateur efforts to convey emotions through color and shape now adorn my office, serving as reminders of my healing journey. My mother also found her own way to heal. After years of having her preferences overlooked by Henry, she methodically rediscovered herself, embracing her favorite foods, colors, music, and hobbies. She began wearing bright red lipstick again, took up gardening, and joined a book club. These small acts of reclaiming her identity collectively formed a new self, one shaped by choice rather than fear. I continued, explaining that the pivotal moment in my healing came when I understood that clinging to hatred for my abuser was keeping me tethered to him. By channeling my energy into anger, I allowed him to maintain control over my emotional life, even from prison. True freedom was found in letting go, not of accountability, but of the destructive power of hatred. This was the hardest part of my recovery. The anger felt justified, protective, and necessary. Learning to release it without downplaying the harm inflicted required the guidance of skilled therapists and the support of those who had experienced similar struggles. The Breakthrough Center evolved beyond what I had initially envisioned. We now provided personalized counseling, support groups, career development workshops, and assistance with housing. A network of volunteer lawyers offered legal advice. Former clients returned as peer mentors, fostering a community of mutual support. One inspiring story was Nancy, a woman in her 40s who had attended one of my initial public speaking events. After enduring 15 years with an abusive partner, she found the strength to leave, partly motivated by hearing my story. Now, she volunteered at the center, her accounting expertise proving invaluable to clients working towards financial independence. The biggest misconception about abuse, I shared with the audience, is that it only affects certain types of individuals, those perceived as weak or codependent. The reality is that abuse can impact anyone. Victims do not require our judgment, they need our empathy and practical assistance. As I wrapped up my speech, I scanned the faces in front of me. Some showed visible scars, while others bore wounds that were invisible yet equally real. Each individual represented both a tragedy and a triumph in their lives. They had been derailed by violence but refused to let it define them. I mentioned how my stepfather took many things from my mother and me: years of peace, a sense of safety, and physical well-being. However, he could not take what truly matters: our ability to heal, to love, and to create something new from the ruins. That resilience exists in each of you. It is not something extraordinary or unique to me. It is the essential human capacity to start anew, regardless of how many times we have been shattered. The applause was heartfelt as I concluded, with several women dabbing at their tears. As they gathered around to talk with me afterward, sharing their own experiences and struggles, I felt the familiar blend of sorrow and hope that now defined my work. Each conversation served as a reminder that healing occurs through connection, not isolation. We rediscover ourselves by helping others to heal. Later that evening, Eric and I hosted a cozy dinner at our apartment. My mother brought her renowned apple pie, Margaret, from work, accompanied by her husband, while Professor Levine arrived from the university. Surrounded by this chosen family, I pondered how far we had all journeyed. Eric proposed a toast, lifting his glass. To Clara, whose bravery continues to motivate everyone around her. I shook my head and raised my own glass. To all of us, for choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. Each day, as laughter and conversation filled the apartment that had once witnessed such violence, I felt the truth of what I had shared with the women earlier: trauma changes you forever. There is no returning to who you were before. However, with support, determination, and time, you can create something new and meaningful from the remnants that remain. What transpired that night 7 years ago will always be a part of my story, but it is no longer the defining chapter. It is merely one segment of a much broader narrative about resilience, compassion, and the transformative power of breaking silence. If this story has resonated with you in any way, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with overcoming challenges or resources that have aided you during tough times. Remember that subscribing and liking helps these stories reach others who may feel isolated in their struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, no matter what you have faced, healing is always achievable, and you are never truly alone.